All right, so we're going to go over the operation of the economy air rinser. So when you power the machine up, you'll come up to this main screen here. You're going to see on the left-hand side your master switches. These will allow you to press the cycle start button. When it's blue, it'll take off and run. That means it's on. When it turns to this gray color, it'll be off. The rinse button just below that, that'll activate the rinse feature. So if you turn that off, rinse won't work. If you turn that on, the rinse will work. Same thing with the conveyor. These buttons will override anything that's done on the rest of the setup. So even if you have them turned on somewhere else, if you turn them off here, they're off. The other options you see is you'll have alarms displayed down here on the bottom if you have any alarms that are active. So if you have the e-stop pushed or anything like that, that'll give you an alert there. You also right in the middle have the in-feed container count. So that'll count your container in-feed count during an indexing cycle, and it'll reset after each cycle. The containers per minute will also calculate the containers per minute of the last completed cycle, and it'll reset after the end of the cycle. So from here up along the top, you'll have a bunch of tabs that you can activate to navigate to different setups of the touchscreen. If I hit the setup tab there at the top, it'll take me to my setup tab here, which option that I have here is selecting whether or not I have indexing on or not. I can have it off, and then when I hit a cycle, it'll just drop down and rinse what's under the heads at the moment. If I have it set to pin indexing, then it'll cycle through with my conveyor. So if I got something like a slide track instead of a conveyor, I'll turn my indexing off, and then I'll just slide my containers underneath the heads, hit the cycle start button, it'll dive down, rinse, come back up. At the top there, I got a couple of other options. I can go back to the main. I can go to my ASU. So if I go to my ASU, this is where I can set my automatic setup for my pin indexing. This is if you have a conveyor and you have pin indexing turned on. There's another video that shows you how to run through this setup here. If I go back to my setup tab, I also have my I/O screen. This is where I can see any of the inputs or any of the outputs that the PLC is seeing. These are really good for maintenance, diagnostics, setup. Back on that setup screen, I also have a login button. If I go there, there's nothing that an operator needs to use under the login. That's just for main setup. But this tab at the top right will allow you to clear all of your recipes. Back on that setup screen, I can go to that main button, will take me back to the main. Then I can navigate next to my manual toggle screen. Once I move to that, this will give me my options for any of the operations that I want to manually operate. So if I press the entry gate button, it's going to retract my entry gate. Same thing with the exit. If I hit the rinse button, it's going to activate my rinse until I hit that button again to turn it back off. Everything on this screen will reset to an auto state except for the conveyor. When I leave the screen, that one will stay at either a run or it'll be an auto. If I come back to the main screen, the next tab I have is my timers. If I go to my timer screen, it brings me to the first timer screen where I have entry delay, which is going to be the amount of space essentially in between the containers leaving the rinse zone and the new containers coming in, leaving a gap for the exit gate to be able to come across the conveyor between them. The in-feed count is going to be how many containers is this machine going to have to count as they're moving into the rinse zone. It's typically the same number as fill heads as you have, unless you're running like in every other rinse situation. No bottle, no fill time is going to be how long does a container have to sit in front of the in-feed count sensor after it's made its count before it moves on in the process. The exit duration is going to be how long does it take for the containers to make it from the entry pin to the exit pin, which is what you set up during your automatic setup. The rinse start delay will be after the container's index in. How long does it wait before the rinse starts? So this allows you enough time to dive down and get fully in place before you start the pressurized rinse. And the rinse duration is simply how long are you going to rinse the containers for. The delay head return after the rinse complete is going to be how long after the rinse timer ends. How long does it sit there and vacuum for before it lifts up off the containers? If you hit next, it'll take you to the next screen. This is going to bring you to the delay dive. So after the containers index in, how long do we wait until we dive into the container? And the exit retract delay, a new cycle. This will be a delay at the end of the cycle when everything's complete. How long do we wait till we pull the exit pin out? So if you have a really long rinser nozzle tip and it's coming up out of the container, sometimes you have to put a little delay there so that the containers don't start moving before the rinser tip is out of the container all the way. Backup on, it's going to be how long does the line backup sensor have to be blocked before it will actually cause a pause situation. Cycle reset delay, this will be to slow this machine down if you're overrunning slower equipment down the line. So if I go back to that main screen now, the next tab that I have available is recipe. So once I get this machine working where I like it, I can come in here and I can select recipe 1 through 10, and then I could either save that for use later, or I can select that recipe number and reload it for use now.